The desert night held its breath, the wind cutting low across the silent town. A church bell tolled once, echoing like a ghostly warning. Samuel Cain said, "I never wanted it to end this way." The words were rough, bitten by regret. His hand trembled near the iron grip of his revolver, scarred knuckles brushing against cold steel. The saloon lamps flickered, shadows stretching like demons across the dusty street. A gunshot cracked the silence, shattering glass, scattering silence into chaos. Martha Lane screamed from the porch, her voice sharp as the bullet tore into the night. Sheriff Dorian Price stepped forward, the silver badge on his chest catching the lantern glow, glinting blood-red as dust swirled. His eyes carried hunger, not justice. Jesse Cole stumbled into view, clutching his side, coughing dust and blood. He said, "Sam, don't trust him." Cain's jaw tightened, his shadow etched against the wooden facade. The townsfolk froze behind broken windows, breaths caught in fear. The desert seemed to lean in, the stars fading behind rolling clouds. In that frozen instant, the old world of law and lies collided with the raw truth of vengeance. The silence was gone. The war had begun. The street was no longer silent, fear hung like smoke. Samuel Cain said, "He'll bleed this town dry." His words were jagged with certainty. Jesse Cole whispered, "Don't let him win," as blood dripped from his lips. Sheriff Dorian Price stood still, his polished boots planted firm in dust, the badge gleaming with false promise. The people cowered, powerless under the weight of law, twisted into tyranny. Martha Lane gripped the railing of the porch, trembling. She said, "Sam, please don't." But Cain's stare was locked, not at her, but at the man who had taken everything. The desert wind hissed, carrying grit like whispers of the dead. The saloon doors creaked open, spilling more light into the dirt street. Cain's shadow stretched far, like a rope tightening around his fate. Sheriff Price said, "You never did know when to quit." The words slid out like venom. Cain lifted his chin, scars catching the glow. He said, "I know when a man's rotten." Jesse groaned, voice weak, "He's worse than rotten." Martha's hands covered her mouth, tears wetting her face. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ground as the storm drew near. The storm broke with a sudden gust, rattling shutters and sending grit into eyes. Sheriff Price's coat flared in the wind as he took a slow step forward. Samuel Cain's revolver twitched in his grip, eyes locked on the badge that gleamed like betrayal. Martha Lane said, "Sam, don't lose yourself." But Cain's silence was answer enough. Jesse Cole coughed again, weaker, eyes fixed on his friend. He said, "End it, Sam." Lightning flared, painting them in white fire, shadows splitting across the street. The church bell tolled again, deep and haunting, cutting through the storm. Cain's eyes burned, his chest heaving with rage and sorrow. He said, "This ends tonight." Sheriff Price tilted his head, smile cruel and sharp. He said, "Then die for it." Thunder rolled, drowning the gasp of the townsfolk. Jesse Cole's voice faltered, "Sam." His body slumped. Martha Lane screamed again, her voice breaking with loss. Dust swirled as the storm consumed the town, and the night held its breath for the first shot to decide their fate. The storm quieted, leaving behind a heavy silence that pressed against the town like a coffin lid. Samuel Cain sat alone at the edge of the saloon, his revolver laid on the table, hands shaking from the memory of Jesse's cry. He said, "I swore I'd never draw again." His words were rough, etched with despair. A lantern burned low, the flame guttering in the draft. Martha Lane entered quietly, her steps soft, dress torn at the hem. She whispered, "You can't carry this weight forever." Cain's eyes stayed on the badge lying in the dirt outside the door, the silver smeared with dust and blood. He muttered, "That badge killed more than bullets." His chest heaved, guilt rising like bile. Outside, thunder rumbled far away, fading. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Martha's hand trembled as she reached for him but stopped, caught between comfort and fear. Kane clenched his jaw, haunted by faces he couldn't forget. He said, "Every ghost in this town wears my shadow." The church bell rang faintly in the distance, its echo trembling through the town's hollow streets. Sheriff Dorian Price stood in his office, polishing his badge, his reflection glaring back at him from the cracked mirror. He said, "Law is what I decide it is." His voice was low, dangerous. A deputy shifted nervously nearby, eyes darting. Price's gaze cut sharp, silencing the room. He muttered, "Kane thinks he's a savior. He's just another corpse waiting for a grave." Lightning flickered through the cracked shutters, illuminating the lawman's face, ambition etched deep, hunger in his stare. He gripped his revolver, the sound echoing like a promise. The storm outside had passed, but inside, a darker one gathered. Morning broke with pale light seeping over the desert horizon. Samuel Kane leaned against the hitching post, watching dust swirl in the dawn wind. His eyes were hollow, red-rimmed from sleepless hours. Martha Lane approached carrying a cloth bundle, her hands shaking. She said, "Eat something, you'll need strength." Kane shook his head slowly, voice gravelly. "Strength never saved anyone I loved." A horse stamped nervously nearby, sensing the tension. The town awoke slowly, shutters creaking open, townsfolk casting fearful glances toward Kane. A child whispered to his mother, "Is he the one who will stop Price?" Kane's shoulders tightened. He muttered, "They don't know what kind of man I am." The desert stretched endless under rising sun, painted gold and red, unforgiving. Samuel Kane saddled his horse, movements sharp, restless. Jesse Cole's words haunted him, echoing, "Don't let him win." Martha Lane stepped closer, voice trembling, "Sam, you'll destroy yourself before you destroy him." Kane's jaw locked. He said, "I already destroyed myself years ago." The saddle creaked under his grip, hands scarred and rough. His shadow stretched long, a broken figure bound by ghosts. Martha's eyes welled with tears as she whispered, "Then what are you fighting for?" He paused, silent, the weight of memory crushing him. That night, the saloon filled with whispers. Cards slapped, whiskey poured, but all eyes turned toward Kane as he entered. His boots thudded on wooden planks, every sound heavy. Men shrank into corners, women looked away. Sheriff Price's name rolled off tongues like poison. An old man muttered, "The town's cursed till one of them dies." Kane's eyes swept the room, settling on the worn faces of people crushed by fear. He said, "You all know what he is." His voice was raw, filled with quiet rage. Silence followed, heavy, until one young man stood. His voice cracked, "We can't fight him." Kane's gaze hardened. He said, "Then I will." The midday sun beat down mercilessly, burning the dirt street until heat shimmered like ghosts. Samuel Kane walked with heavy steps, his boots raising small clouds of dust. His eyes were fixed, jaw set like stone. A voice called from behind. Jesse Cole, weak but defiant, leaned on the doorframe of the blacksmith's shop. He said, "You can't fight Price alone." Kane didn't turn, his shadow stretched long before him. He muttered, "I've always been alone." Martha Lane stood nearby, gripping her shawl tight, her voice desperate. She cried, "Sam, listen to him." But Kane's silence was a wall she couldn't climb. The townsfolk lingered in the shade, whispering prayers that no one would hear. A vulture circled high above, casting fleeting shadows across the ground. The weight of the coming storm pressed down harder than the sun. Kane's hand brushed the revolver at his hip, not in threat but in restless memory. He said, "Some wars can't be walked away from." Inside the sheriff's office, Dorian Price leaned over a map of the town, tapping the desk with his finger. He said, "He's circling closer, but he'll break before long." His deputies shifted nervously, sweat rolling under their collars. One deputy whispered, "What if the people side with him?" Price's glare cut sharp, silencing him. He snarled, "Fear keeps them in line. And Kane bleeds fear." The room smelled of whiskey and gun oil, the air thick with tension. A rifle leaned against the wall, ready for the storm to come. Lightning had passed, but thunder still rolled in men's hearts. At the edge of town, Samuel Kane sat sharpening his knife, the sound grating like a whisper of violence. Jesse Cole limped toward him, face pale, blood still fresh on his shirt. He said, "Sam, you can't keep pushing us away." Kane's eyes narrowed, blade flashing in the sun. He muttered, "The closer you are, the faster you fall." Jesse's voice cracked, anger piercing his weakness. He shouted, "I ain't afraid to fall." Martha Lane approached quietly, her voice breaking, "Please stop before you tear yourself apart." Kane stopped sharpening, his breath ragged, haunted. He said, "I already tore apart long ago." The saloon buzzed low with whispers when Kane pushed through its doors. Silence fell. Glasses clinked nervously. The barkeep froze mid-motion, his hands trembling. Kane said, "You've all lived under his boot too long." His words were steel, sharp, and unyielding. A man in the corner spat tobacco, muttering, "He'll kill you like the rest." Kane's gaze swept the room, landing on faces worn with fear. He muttered, "Then let him try." Martha Lane slipped in behind him, her eyes wide with dread. She whispered, "Sam, don't drag them with you." Kane's shadow stretched across the barroom floor, long and dark. Night fell heavy, wrapping the town in shadows. Kane stood alone at the cemetery fence, wind howling across headstones. He said, "I buried too many under this soil." His voice cracked, almost broken. Lightning flashed far away, illuminating the names carved in stone. Jesse Cole appeared behind him, weak but determined. He whispered, "You fight because of them, not despite them." Kane's shoulders tensed, tears burning but never falling. He muttered, "Their ghosts will walk with me." From the distance, the church bell tolled again, each strike like a nail in a coffin, sealing fate in iron silence. The saloon was crowded, but silent when Eliza Munro stepped inside, her red dress catching every eye. She moved like a shadow draped in silk, her face calm, but her eyes stormed with secrets. Samuel Kane turned, recognition flashing in his haunted gaze. He muttered, "I thought you were gone." Eliza's voice cut sharp, "You never knew me, Sam." Her words dripped with betrayal and pain. Sheriff Dorian Price leaned back in his chair, smirking as he said, "She always worked for me." The room gasped, whiskey glasses rattling on tables. Martha Lane's face fell pale, her hand trembling at her side. Jesse Cole staggered forward, anger in his voice. "Sam, she's part of this." Kane's breath hitched, memories clashing with present truth. The air cracked with tension, heavier than bullets. Eliza's voice echoed in the silence. She said, "Every coin price took passed through my hands. Every whisper in this town came to me." Kane's fists clenched at his side, veins standing against his skin. He said, "You used me." Her eyes softened for an instant, lips trembling before she whispered, "I saved you." Sheriff Price chuckled, the sound cold as steel. He said, "She belongs to me, Kane. Always has." Martha Lane's breath caught, as if stabbed. Jesse Cole's voice trembled with fury. "You lied to all of us." The saloon's air thickened, sweat rolling down brows, fear and betrayal choking every breath. The saloon erupted in whispers, fear crawling across wooden walls. Samuel Kane's hand hovered near his revolver, but his eyes burned with heartbreak, not rage. He said, "You had a choice." Eliza Munro's voice cracked, "You think I wanted this? Price owns me." Sheriff Price leaned forward, badge catching firelight, his smile cruel. He said, "Some women are born to deceive." Jesse Cole staggered toward Kane, clutching his side. He muttered, "She's poison." Martha Lane stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Sam, let her go." The weight of betrayal pressed heavier than any bullet, and Kane's silence was an answer all its own. Sheriff Price stood, the chair creaking as he rose, his shadow towering over the room. He said, "Kane, you're a fool. She kept you alive because I ordered it." The words struck like bullets, and silence shattered under gasps. Kane's breath faltered, fury and betrayal colliding. He muttered, "Every step, every breath, controlled by you." Eliza Monroe's face twisted with pain, whispering, "I wanted to protect you, Sam." Jesse Cole's anger burned hot, his voice loud despite his weakness. He said, "She's as rotten as him." Martha Lane's tears glistened in lantern glow. She whispered, "Sam, the truth doesn't free us, it only chains us tighter." The air smelled of sweat, whiskey, and death looming near. The storm outside broke, thunder rolling deep across the desert night. Samuel Kane stared at Eliza Monroe, his voice low, cracked by grief. He said, "You were the last piece of hope I held." Eliza's tears fell, staining her red dress darker. She whispered, "I never wanted to be your enemy." Sheriff Price laughed, stepping closer, his boots echoing on wooden planks. He said, "She chose survival. You chose death." Jesse Cole's breath rattled, his face pale as bone. He muttered, "Sam, it's over." Martha Lane cried out, "No, it's just begun." Lightning flared through windows, painting them all in stark white light, every scar and lie bared. The town would never be the same. The night deepened, the storm lingering on the horizon, its growl fading but never gone. Samuel Kane stood outside the saloon, his revolver heavy at his side, the world pressing against his chest. Jesse Cole leaned weakly on the hitching post, his voice ragged, "You can't take him alone." Kane's jaw tightened as he muttered, "I've got no choice." Martha Lane stepped into the street, rain dripping from her hair, her voice breaking, "You'll lose yourself before you kill him." Kane's stare fixed on the sheriff's office, a shadowed building that seemed alive with menace. His silence was heavier than thunder. The townsfolk lingered at their doors, their whispers threading through the dark like prayers. Inside a dim barn on the edge of town, the old gunslinger Elias Crow sat in silence, his weathered hands cleaning a rifle older than himself. His eyes lifted as Kane entered. Crow said, "The years haven't taught you caution." Kane replied, voice low, "I don't need caution, I need truth." Crow leaned back, his scarred face etched with sorrow. He muttered, "Truth don't save men, Sam. It buries them." Kane's fists clenched, his voice cracking, "Then bury me with it." Jesse Cole's voice rose faintly from outside, "We can still win." The words hung hollow, swallowed by the creak of wood and the weight of memory. The church bell tolled again, hollow and cold, echoing across the town square. Kane stood with Elias Crow at his side, the elder's limp dragging softly through the dirt. Martha Lane appeared, her shawl clutched against her chest. "No," she said, "this town is dying, Sam. Don't bury yourself with it." Kane's gaze was fixed on the sheriff's office. He whispered, "I already buried myself long ago." Crow's deep voice rumbled, "Redemption ain't free. It never was." Jesse Cole staggered closer, voice hoarse, "Then pay it with his blood." The bell faded into silence, leaving the town trembling in its shadow. In the sheriff's office, Dorian Price stood before his deputies, his voice iron. He said, "Tomorrow Kane falls." His eyes gleamed with hunger. A deputy muttered, "The town may side with him." Price struck the table with his fist, snarling, "Fear binds tighter than hope." Eliza Monroe lingered in the corner, her red dress dulled by lamplight, her face pale, torn between loyalty and despair. Price turned sharply, "You'll lead him to me." Eliza's lips trembled, her whisper barely audible. "And if I don't?" Price's grin widened, sharp as a blade. He said, "Then you die with him." Silence drowned the room, the storm outside echoing her torment. The night air was heavy, carrying the scent of rain and dust. Samuel Kane sat by the edge of the cemetery, revolver resting across his knees, the graves lit by moonlight. He muttered, "I carry you all with me." Elias Crow lowered himself onto a stump, his voice deep, "Then carry us to the end." Martha Lane approached, tears streaking her cheeks. "Sam, if you fight him, there's no coming back." Jesse Cole stood behind her, leaning heavily, his voice trembling. Then maybe there's no going back anyway. Kane's eyes burned, his silence sharper than any blade. The wind howled, scattering dust across the gravestones like whispers of the dead. The dawn broke with fire across the desert sky, painting the town in blood and gold. Samuel Kane stepped into the center of the street, boots sinking into dust still damp from storm. His revolver hung heavy at his hip, hand hovering near its grip. Sheriff Dorian Price emerged from his office, the badge on his chest blazing in sunlight. He said, "The law walks with me, Kane." Kane's voice cracked but carried steel. "The law died the day you wore that badge." The townsfolk crowded behind windows and porches, breathless as silence split the air. The wind held still, waiting for violence to break it. Jesse Cole leaned weakly against a wall, whispering, "Sam." Martha Lane clutched his arm, her eyes wide with terror. Elias Crow limped closer, rifle in hand, his voice deep. "This ends now." Sheriff Price's grin widened, the morning light turning his shadow long and sharp. He said, "You're nothing but a thief hiding behind ghosts." Kane's chest heaved, voice ragged. "Better a thief than a murderer with a badge." The words cut through silence like a blade. Price's hand twitched toward his revolver, and the town held its breath. Jesse Cole whispered, "Sam, don't lose your soul." Kane's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, the past carved into every line of his face. Elias Crow's voice rumbled, "Wait for his first move, boy." The church bell tolled faintly, its hollow sound echoing through the stillness, marking judgment's arrival. The first gunshot cracked like thunder, wood splintering from a porch post. Townsfolk screamed, ducking for cover. Kane drew his revolver, steel flashing in morning light. Price fired again, bullet whistling past Kane's head. Dust exploded as Kane rolled behind a trough, returning fire with deadly precision. Elias Crow steadied his rifle, firing at one of Price's deputies who rushed in, dropping him in the dirt. Jesse Cole struggled upright, shouting, "Sam, watch your left." Martha Lane dragged him back, eyes wide with terror. The battle filled the street, bullets cutting through silence, each shot a judgment. Kane's face burned with fury and sorrow, every bullet carrying ghosts with it. Kane burst from cover, revolver blazing, his eyes locked on Price. Bullets screamed past, kicking up dirt and splinters. Price advanced with steady strides, every shot calculated. Kane's voice tore through the chaos, "This badge dies with you." Price snarled, "This badge never dies." Their words were drowned by gunfire as they closed distance. Elias Crow limped forward, rifle ready, covering Kane's flank. Jesse Cole, pale and trembling, lifted a fallen pistol, his hands shaking as he aimed. Martha Lane shouted, "No, Jesse!" But his defiance burned through weakness. The town trembled as fate narrowed to a single heartbeat. The street fell silent in a frozen instant, both men standing in the open, guns raised, eyes locked. Kane's breath rattled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Price sneered, his badge glinting in the rising sun, his revolver leveled steady. Time stretched thin, the world shrinking to two men and their ghosts. Jesse Cole's weak voice cut the silence, "Do it, Sam." Martha Lane's sob broke the moment, "Don't." Elias Crow's voice boomed, "Choose, boy." Thunder cracked as both guns fired, smoke twisting in the air. The echo rolled through town, sealing fate. One man staggered. One man fell. The smoke from the duel drifted slowly into the pale morning, curling like ghosts over the fallen body of Sheriff Dorian Price. Samuel Kane stood trembling, revolver still raised, his breath broken and uneven. The silver badge lay in dirt beside the corpse, its gleam tarnished with blood and dust. Jesse Cole whispered hoarsely, "It's over." But Kane's eyes held no victory, only shadows of the past. Martha Lane clutched Jesse, tears streaming down her cheeks as she cried, "Sam, what have you done?" Elias Crow's gravelly voice cut through the silence. He chose the only path left. The townsfolk crept from hiding, their faces a blend of fear, relief, and awe. The desert wind carried silence heavier than thunder. Samuel Kane lowered his revolver slowly, his hand shaking as if it weighed the world. He stared at the lifeless sheriff, then at the badge glinting in the dirt. He muttered, "It ends here." Elias Crow stepped forward, his limp dragging through dust, his voice steady. "No, boy, it begins here. They'll need someone to stand or hell haunt this ground forever." Jesse Cole stumbled closer, clutching his ribs, his eyes burning with stubborn fire. He said, "Then let it be me." Martha Lane's tears fell harder, her voice breaking. "No, Jesse, don't carry his curse." The sun rose higher, burning shadows long and sharp, as silence stretched like a wound that would never close. The townsfolk gathered, their murmurs rising like a tide. An old woman whispered, "The sheriff's dead." A man muttered, "Then, who leads us now?" Their voices tangled with fear and hope, eyes all turning toward Kane. He shook his head, his voice raw. "I'm no savior." Martha Lane clutched her shawl, her voice sharp with grief. "Then what was it all for?" Kane's jaw clenched, his silence louder than words. Elias Crow's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. It was for a choice. Jesse Cole's weak voice broke through, a choice to fight or to kneel. The weight of the moment pressed down, the desert sun, merciless as the people waited for an answer that never came. Eliza Monroe stepped forward from the saloon shadows, her red dress torn, her face pale as ashes. Her eyes met Kane's, shimmering with regret. She whispered, "I never wanted this end." Kane's breath caught, his voice raw. "Then why?" Her voice broke, "Because survival never cared about love." Martha Lane's face hardened, her tears turning bitter. Jesse Cole's weak voice spat, "You betrayed us all." Eliza's shoulders sagged, her beauty hollow in the morning light. Elias Crow said, "She carries her own gallows." The townsfolk watched in silence as Kane turned away, his heart too heavy to carry her truth any longer. The sun blazed high, shadows retreating as Samuel Kane walked alone down the dirt road, dust rising at each step. His revolver hung heavy at his side, his eyes locked on the horizon. Behind him, the town whispered, in relief and sorrow, "A people freed but broken." Jesse Cole's voice carried faintly, "He gave us a chance." Martha Lane held Jesse tighter, her tears unending. Elias Crow's voice rumbled, "He walks with his ghosts." Eliza Monroe turned away, her face streaked with tears, her secret chains heavier than steel. The church bell rang one last time, deep and hollow. Kane didn't look back. His shadows stretched long, vanishing into the desert heat, leaving the blood-stained badge behind.